The jump was wrong before it even finished. I knew at the moment the stars came back. They were in the wrong places. Not shifted slightly, not drifted by a degree or two. Wrong. Completely, absolutely, impossibly wrong. I had spent 11 years learning star charts the way other people learn the faces of their family. I could tell you the position of 4,000 reference stars from memory, and not one of them was where it was supposed to be. I sat in the navigator's chair of the ISV steadfast for about 4 seconds and did nothing. For seconds of pure, silent, total blankness. And then I reached for my coffee, took a slow sip, and opened the ship-wide channel. "This is Navigator Vera Cole," I said. "We have completed the jump. We are not at our intended destination. I need Captain Hayes on the bridge now, and I need Engineer Ford to run a full diagnostic on the drive core. Nobody panic. This is just a problem, and problems have solutions." I clicked off the channel and looked at the stars again. They were beautiful in a completely unhelpful way. Captain Liam Hayes came through the bridge door 40 seconds later. He was still pulling on his jacket. He looked at the forward display, looked at me, looked at the display again, and said nothing for a long moment. "How far?" he asked. "Running the calculation now," I said. "But based on what I can see through the forward sensors, I think we are somewhere in the range of 30 to 50,000 light years from home." Liam sat down in his chair slowly, the way a man sits down when his legs have decided to stop working properly, but he refuses to acknowledge it. "The drive?" he asked. "Ford is on it. I would guess 3 hours before we have a full picture. Crew, 7 of us. All present. Life support nominal. Hull integrity at 100%. Food stores for 4 months. Water recyclers fully operational. We are structurally fine." Liam looked at me again. "You just told the crew not to panic." "Yes. How are you not panicking?" I thought about that for a moment. It was a fair question. I was 42 years old. I had spent 6 years in deep space exploration. I had been in 3 emergency situations before this one. A reactor leak on the Hermes, a collision with debris near the outer belt, and one very bad storm on a planetary survey that nobody ever talked about anymore. In every single one of those situations, I had noticed the same thing happening inside me. A kind of cold clarity. Not calm exactly. Not the absence of fear. More like the fear and the thinking happening at the same time, side by side, and the thinking winning by a very small margin. "I'm panicking," I said. "I'm just doing it quietly." Liam almost smiled. He turned to the forward display. "Run the full calculation. I want exact numbers." Already running. The rest of the crew filtered in over the next 20 minutes. Owen Ford, our engineer, arrived first after the captain, still carrying a handheld diagnostic scanner because he had clearly started working the moment I made the announcement. He was a compact, methodical man who expressed emotion almost entirely through the speed at which he typed. He was typing very fast. Grace Abbott, our medic, came in with 2 cups of something hot and gave one to Liam without saying anything. She had been in space longer than any of us. She had that particular quality of people who have seen enough bad days to know that most of them end without anyone dying. Neil Croft, our communications officer, came in already pulling up long-range sensor sweeps. Danny Walsh, the youngest of us at 29, arrived last and immediately sat down at a secondary station without being told and started cross-referencing the star map data with the historical archive we carried. This was what I meant when I said we were fine. Not that we were not afraid. We were all afraid. But the fear had a direction to it, and the direction was forward. The numbers came in at the 2-hour mark. 41,230 light years from Earth. No one said anything for a moment. 41,000 light years. The number sat in the air of the bridge the way a very large stone sits in a very small room. "Well," said Grace, and then did not say anything else. "The drive is done," said Owen. He did not look up from his scanner. "The field coil burned out on exit. We cannot jump again without a full replacement. That is not something I can do out here." "What can we do with what we have?" Liam asked. "Sublight. We have fuel for roughly 18 months of travel. At maximum efficient speed, that moves us maybe 400 light years. Against 41,000, he paused. "Those numbers do not add up well." "No," said Liam. "They do not. Neil looked up from his station. I am broadcasting on all frequencies. Standard first contact protocol. If there is anyone out here to hear it, they will hear us. How long until we know if anyone hears? I asked. Could be minutes. Could be never. We sat with that. It was Danny who spoke next. And what he said was the most honest thing said on that bridge for the rest of the day. He said, I am very scared right now, but I also want to know what is out here. I think that is the strangest thing about being human. Both of those things can be true at the same time. Nobody disagreed. It was 11 minutes later when the alien ship appeared. It did not come slowly. One moment the display showed empty space, and the next moment there was a vessel on our sensors the size of a small city. It had dropped out of some form of faster-than-light travel that our instruments barely registered, which told us immediately that whoever built it was operating on a level of technology significantly beyond ours. It sat 200 kilometers off our port side and did nothing for exactly 4 seconds. Then it hailed us. The signal came through Neil's station, and he patched it to the main speakers without translating it because we did not have a translation for it. It was a sequence of tones and structured pulses, repeating in a way that made clear it was a deliberate communication and not a random signal. Neil started running the universal translation protocols we carried. They were designed for this moment, this exact moment, built by linguists and mathematicians over 30 years precisely, because someone had always believed this day would come. Give it time, Neil said. It is pattern matching. The alien ship did not move. It simply waited. I had the sensors running full detail on it, and I could see it was armed. The weapon signatures were unmistakable even to our instruments. Whatever those weapons were, they were not small. They have the guns pointed at us? Liam asked quietly. They have weapons active, I said. Not targeted. It reads more like a holster than a raised hand. The translation came through 6 minutes later. Imperfect, broken in places, but enough. The message said something along the lines of, identify your vessel, your origin, and your authority, or face removal from restricted space. Liam leaned forward slightly. He looked at Neil. Can we reply in something they will understand? I can send back through the same protocol. It will be rough. Do it. Liam thought for a moment and then spoke carefully. This is Captain Liam Hayes of the Earth vessel Steadfast. We are explorers from a planet called Earth in a star system about 41,000 light years from your current position. We are not here intentionally. Our drive failed during an experimental jump and we ended up here. We mean no harm to anyone. We will be very grateful for any assistance you can offer, including star charts of this region, if that is something you're able to provide. Neil sent it. The alien ship was silent for 3 minutes. Then it replied. The translation was still rough, but clearer now, as if the translation algorithm on their end was much faster than ours. The reply said, "You're alone?" Liam looked at me. I nodded once. Yes, Liam said. There are 7 of us. Another silence. Longer this time. It said, you have come 41,000 light years from your home, and you are alone with no support vessel. Correct, Liam said. It said, you are requesting star charts. If it is not too much trouble, Liam said. There was a silence after that one that lasted almost 2 full minutes. I watched the alien ship on the sensors. It did not move. Its weapon stayed in that middle state, neither lowered nor raised. I had the impression of something very large try to process something very small that was not behaving the way it was supposed to. The final message came through clearly, clearer than anything before it, as if they had put more effort into making sure we understood this one correctly. It said, we're taking you to our nearest station. Do not attempt to move. We will escort you. Thank you, Liam said. We appreciate it. I wrote my first log entry of the day after that. I keep logs the way other people keep diaries, detailed and personal, because someday someone might want to know what this felt like from the inside. I wrote, Day 1 in unknown space. We are 41,000 light years from home. Our drive is broken, and we have just been picked up by what appears to be a patrol vessel of a civilization we did not know existed 2 hours ago. The crew is handling it well. Danny is already trying to learn the alien language from the translation data. Owen is writing a maintenance checklist. Grace is making more hot drinks. Neil is recording everything. Liam is staring at the forward display with that expression he gets when he is solving a problem in his head and does not want to bother anyone else with it yet. I do not know what happens next. I know that we will figure it out. I know this because we have always figured it out. Every time, going back further than anyone can remember, something goes wrong, and humans fix it, or survive it, or find a way around it, and then they look up and ask what comes next. That is the only plan we have ever had. And so far, it has never let us down. I closed the log. I looked at the alien ship on the sensor display. It was enormous and strange, and built by minds that were nothing like mine. I thought, I wonder what they are like. And then I thought, I suppose we are about to find out. I refilled my coffee and got back to work on the star charts. The station appeared on our sensors before we could see it with the naked eye, and even then it took a moment to understand what we were looking at. It was not a station the way humans build stations, which is to say it was not a compact cluster of modules bolted together in orbit around something useful. It was massive in the way that mountains are massive, the kind of size that stops feeling like engineering and starts feeling like geology. It hung in open space, lit from within by 1,000 light sources of different colors, turning slowly on an axis with the patience of something that had been turning for a very long time. Neil ran the numbers without being asked. Diameter roughly 400 kilometers, he said. I am counting active docking bays in the hundreds. Population estimate based on energy output and heat signature is somewhere between 8 and 20 million individuals. 20 million people on a space station, Danny said, mostly to himself. At minimum, Neil said. Our escort, the alien patrol vessel, had communicated 3 more times during the journey. Each time, the translation had gotten a little smoother, a little clearer, which told me their systems were working fast. The last message had been a set of approach coordinates and a docking bay number, delivered with the efficiency of someone who had done this 1,000 times and saw no need to make it complicated. What had not been communicated was any kind of welcome, any reassurance, any explanation of what would happen to us when we arrived. They had given us a destination, and the implication was clear. Come here, and we will figure out the rest. Liam had accepted this without complaint, which was the correct response. We docked at Bay 67, which turned out to be at what appeared to be the outer administrative ring of the station. The bay was large enough to swallow our ship with room to spare, and it was already occupied when we arrived. 3 other vessels of unfamiliar design were berthed along the opposite wall. None of them matched each other's shape, which suggested they were not from the same civilization. This was the moment it fully landed for me. Not the jump, not the alien patrol vessel. This moment, looking at 3 ships that had been built by 3 different sets of hands that were nothing like human hands, in some star system that was not near any star I had ever heard of. We were a very long way from home. Suited up? Liam asked. Suits are unnecessary, I said. Sensor readings on the atmosphere in the bay are within human tolerances. Oxygen-nitrogen mix, slightly higher humidity than we like, but nothing dangerous. I know, Liam said. I'm asking if we are ready. I looked at the crew. Owen had his toolkit. Grace had her medical bag. Neil had his recording equipment and his translation device, which was now loaded with everything we had learned from the patrol vessel's transmissions. Danny had a notebook, an actual paper notebook, because he said he thought better when he wrote by hand, and nobody had ever argued with him because it was true. Kate Rivers, our geologist, who had spent most of the journey running atmospheric scans because she said it calmed her down, had put her scanner away and was standing straight and still with her hands at her sides in the way that meant she had already had whatever internal conversation she needed to have. 7 humans. 1 broken ship. 41,000 light years from home. We are ready, I said. We went out. The first thing I noticed was the sound, or rather the layering of sounds. The bay had a low, constant hum beneath everything, the sound of machinery that never stopped. And on top of that were voices, not human voices, not anything like human voices, but clearly voices, communication between beings who were doing their jobs on a normal day, on a normal station, and had not yet noticed that something extremely abnormal had just docked in Bay 67. The second thing I noticed was that there were 2 individuals waiting for us at the base of the ramp. They were tall, taller than any human I had seen, and lean in a way that suggested a lower gravity origin, with long limbs and a posture that was slightly angled forward, as if they were permanently leaning into a wind only they could feel. Their skin, if it was skin, was a deep blue-gray, and their eyes were large and positioned wider on their faces than human eyes, which gave them a field of vision that I immediately calculated was probably better than ours in most directions. One of them had a device in its hand that I recognized as a translation unit, because it had the same basic shape as ours, a box with an output speaker and a small display. It spoke. The device translated after a half-second delay. "You are the humans," it said. Not a question. "We are," Liam said. "I'm Captain Liam Hayes. This is my crew. I am Veneral," the taller one said. "Intelligence Officer, Kelthery's Sovereignty. You will come with us." It was not aggressive. It was not friendly. It was completely and precisely neutral, the tone of someone who had a job to do and intended to do it. "Of course," Liam said. "Thank you for taking us in." Veneral looked at him for a moment. Then it turned and walked, and we followed. They put us in a wing of what I can only describe as a holding area, though it did not have locks on the doors, which told me something about how they assessed our threat level. The rooms were large by human standards, with furniture that had clearly been adapted in a hurry, because some of it was clearly not designed for human body shapes, but someone had tried. The lighting was slightly too blue. The temperature was slightly too warm. The beds, if they were beds, were longer than they needed to be and had a slight curve to them that was meant for a different spine. We settled in. This is the part that I have tried to explain to people since and always struggled with. What happened in those first hours in those rooms was not what most people expect when they imagine first contact. There was no dramatic speech. No tears. No one stood at a window and stared meaningfully at the alien stars. Owen found that the water recycler in the shared bathroom was operating inefficiently and fixed it. He did not ask permission. He looked at it, identified the problem, found a solution using tools he had in his kit, and fixed it. It took him about 20 minutes. When he came out, he told Grace the water was better now. Danny sat on what passed for a bed and opened his notebook and started writing down every word the translation unit had produced since our first contact, cross-referencing it with the original tonal patterns, looking for grammatical structures. He had 3 pages filled within an hour. Kate set up a small weather station using the sensors from her geology kit to track the air circulation patterns in the rooms, because she said the data might be useful later, and also she wanted to know if the humidity would go down. It did not go down. She noted this and kept recording. Grace unpacked her medical kit, inventoried everything, and set up a small area near the door that she designated as a triage space. Not because anything was wrong, but because she liked having a triage space available on principle. Neil recorded everything, constantly, without being asked. He was doing his job. Liam sat at the table in the main room, laid out 3 sheets of paper, and started writing notes on everything we knew, everything we did not know, and everything we needed to find out. I sat across from him and helped. This is what humans do. I know it might not sound like much, but Veneral was watching us through a monitoring system she did not think we knew about. I had spotted the sensor cluster in the upper corner of the main room within 10 minutes of arrival, because I was a navigator and spotting things in spaces was my profession. I did not mention it to the crew because it did not bother me, and I did not want anyone to perform for the camera. I just wanted them to be themselves. We were in those rooms for about 3 hours before Veneral came back. When she arrived, she stood in the doorway for a moment and looked at us. At Owen's repaired recycler, at Danny's notebook, at Grace's triage corner, at Neil's recording equipment. She looked at it all with an expression that the translation unit could not help me with because expressions are harder than words. Then she looked at me and said, "You were informed of the sensor monitoring?" "I spotted it," I said. "And you said nothing." It did not bother me. She was quiet for a moment. "You did not attempt to cover it. Why would we? We have nothing to hide. We are exactly what we said we were." Another silence. It was a different kind of silence than the ones on the patrol vessel. That silence had been processing. This one felt more like thinking. "Your engineer repaired the water recycler," she said. "He noticed it was not working correctly," I said. "Owen does not really see the point of a broken thing when he can fix it. He did not ask permission." "No, he probably should have. I apologize for that. He meant it kindly. Veneral looked at Owen, who was sitting across the room and had looked up from his work to listen with calm interest. The repair is correct, she said. It has needed attention for some time. I can look at anything else that needs it, if that would help, Owen said. I noticed the air circulation unit in the back room is also running slightly off its optimal cycle. It is probably not causing problems yet, but it will in a few weeks. Veneral stared at him. I can leave it alone if you prefer, Owen said agreeably. I will have someone assess it, she said. She looked back at me. There's a formal meeting being arranged. The station authority and members of the Sovereignty Council who are currently aboard this station wish to speak with your captain. Of course, I said. When? Tomorrow, by your time measurements. We will be ready. She started to turn, then stopped. She turned back. She asked the question in a way that suggested she had been trying not to ask it for several hours. Are you well? She said. Your people. You are well. I thought about the question carefully because it deserved a careful answer. We are frightened, I said. We are very far from home, and we do not know what is going to happen. But we are also functional, and we are curious, and we are together. So yes, I think we are well enough. She looked at me for 3 full seconds. Then she left. About an hour later, a different person arrived at our door. Shorter, with a reddish-brown skin tone and 4 fingers on each hand, wearing a uniform that was different from Veneral's. They looked at us and then looked specifically at Danny, who was sitting nearest the door with his notebook. They held out what appeared to be a small printed booklet. Danny took it. He opened it. It was the station's layout, translated into rough but readable English. Danny looked up. Thank you, he said. The stranger nodded and left. Danny showed me the booklet. Someone went and made this, he said. For us. Someone took the time. I looked at it. It was imperfect. Some of the room labels were clearly translation errors. One section appeared to be labeled as the quiet thinking area, which we later learned was a meditation hall. But someone had sat down and made it. A being on a space station 41,000 light years from Earth had decided that 7 confused humans deserved a map of where they were, and had made one. I put that in my log that night. I put it in because it mattered. Not because it solved anything, but because it was the first real signal that wherever we had landed, there were individuals in it who thought about other people's comfort. That night, I could not sleep. I lay in the curved bed and looked at the blue-lit ceiling and thought about 41,000 light years. I thought about my mother, who was probably asleep right now in a house on a completely different planet, not knowing where I was. I thought about Earth, the specific smell of rain, the particular weight of normal gravity. I did not cry. I wanted to a little, but there was a thought that kept arriving every time the sadness tried to settle, a small, stubborn, very human thought. I wonder what this place is like. I wonder what they eat here and what their history looks like and what stories they tell and how they got from wherever they started to a station this size in the middle of open space. I wonder what we have in common and what is completely different and what is somewhere in between. The curiosity did not make the fear go away. They just both sat there together, and the curiosity was a little bit louder. I fell asleep thinking about it. In the morning, across the station, the gossip channels were running at a volume that apparently had not been seen in years. Venero learned this from her colleagues. The story of the 7 humans from an unknown star was moving through every deck of the station by dawn. The consensus, as far as she could tell, was bewilderment. They had expected fear. They had found something they did not have a word for. The meeting room they brought us to was large enough to feel important without being large enough to be overwhelming. This, as suspected, was deliberate. The chairs were wrong for our bodies, but someone had clearly tried to make them less wrong by adding flat surfaces at the right height. The table was long and polished and reflected the light in a way that made everything look slightly formal. There were 9 of them. Venero was one. The others ranged in appearance from almost familiar to completely unlike anything I had a reference for. 2 of them appeared to be from the same species as Venero. 3 were shorter, broader, with a thick ridge along the crown of their heads and skin that shifted slightly in color as they moved, not dramatically, just a subtle change at the edges, like the surface of still water in low light. Two were tall enough that they had to angle themselves to fit under the ceiling comfortably, and their limbs were long and many-jointed and moved with a quiet precision. The last two were in environmental suits, sealed, with their faces behind a transparent panel, breathing something different from the rest of us. 9 beings from what appeared to be at least 4 different species, sitting at a table together to speak with 7 humans. I looked at them and thought, they've been doing this for a long time. Sitting together, making it work. Whatever brought them here, they had built something that held. Liam sat at the center of our side of the table. I sat to his right. Veneral had told us the meeting would be recorded and translated, and that we should speak slowly and clearly, and that the translation units would handle the rest. The one who spoke first was from a species I had not seen before, a wide-faced individual with deep amber eyes and a pattern of fine marks across their brow that might have been natural or might have been meaningful. I could not tell. When they spoke, the translation came after a brief delay. We are representatives of the Kelthari Sovereignty Station Authority and the Sovereignty Council, the amber-eyed one said. You are the humans. We are, Liam said. Your situation has been explained to us. Your drive is non-functional. Your home system is at a distance of 41,000 light-years. You have no support vessel and no means of rescue from your side. That is correct, Liam said. What is it that you want from us? The question was direct. I appreciated it. Liam had prepared for this. He had sat at the table in our rooms the night before and written out what he wanted to say, not a script, but an outline, the key points in order. He knew what mattered, and he knew the order it mattered in. First, he said, we want to assure you that we are not a threat to you. We are 7 people in a survey vessel. We are far from home, and we are asking for help, not demanding anything. Second, if there is any possibility of assistance in repairing our drive, or any information about how we might eventually find our way home, we would be very grateful. Third, if it is possible and allowed, we would like to learn about where we are, who you are. We came out here because we wanted to know what was beyond what we knew. It turned out to be very far beyond, but the wanting is still there. Silence after that. The kind of silence that has weight to it. The one in the environmental suit on the far end of the table leaned slightly forward. The translation of what they said came through a different pitch than the others. You said you wanted to learn about us. You are aware that you are speaking to a governing body of 43 species, that you are the first representatives of your civilization to ever enter sovereignty space. And your third request is to learn about who we are. Yes, Liam said. Is that strange? It is unexpected, they said. We are explorers, Liam said. It is the first instinct. The one with the amber eyes looked at the others. Something passed between them that was not speech, some kind of communication too quick or too subtle for the translation units to catch. Benaral spoke. We have questions for you as well. Of course, Liam said. We will answer what we can. What followed was 2 hours of the most careful conversation I have ever sat in. They asked about Earth, about our star, our system, our population, about how far our technology extended, what we could build, where we had already traveled, about how our civilization was organized, how decisions were made, what we valued. Some of the questions were clearly practical, information gathering from a security perspective, and Liam answered them fully and honestly, because there was nothing to hide, and hiding things when you were 41,000 light years from home with no leverage and no allies was a very bad strategy anyway. But some of the questions were different, more careful, asked by different council members in turn, as if they had agreed beforehand who would ask what. One of the taller ones, the many-jointed one who had to angle itself under the ceiling, asked, how does your species handle extended periods without contact with your home civilization? Our records on biological species suggest that isolation of this magnitude causes significant psychological degradation. Grace answered that one because it was a medical question, and Liam caught her eye and nodded. It varies, Grace said. Humans are social animals. Isolation is genuinely difficult for us. But 7 is actually a reasonable number for a long-term crew. We have each other, and we have ways of managing. We focus on work. We talk to each other. We make things better where we can. We are not built for giving up. It is not really in the nature. The many-jointed one looked at her, for a long moment. Not in the nature, it repeated. It has never worked well for us, Grace said simply. So we do not do it much. The one in the environmental suit asked. Your drive failure was the result of an experimental jump. This means the technology was untested at this scale. It was tested, Liam said, just not at this particular range. The test results suggested it should work. They were wrong, and yet you attempted it. We wanted to see further than we had seen before, knowing it might fail. Knowing it might fail, Liam confirmed. The silence after that was the longest one. I watched the faces around the table, the ones I could read at all, and what I saw in them was not hostility. It was something I recognized without quite having the right word for it. The look of someone trying to understand a thing that does not fit inside any category they already have. It was the look of the very first moment before the world gets bigger. Veneral finally spoke. You are aware that attempting an untested jump of this magnitude, alone, with no backup, is something that no sovereignty member civilization would do. I believe that, Liam said. And this does not concern you? It concerns us a great deal, Liam said. It is why we ended up here instead of where we planned to be. But it does not make us wish we had not tried. It makes us wish we had better data first. The amber-eyed one made a sound that the translation unit rendered as a pause marker, a sound meaning they were about to say something they had been thinking about for a while. Captain Hayes, they said, what is it that drives your species to attempt things like this? You're not the first species we have encountered who practices exploration, but the others have done so with significant support structures, fleet backing, full diplomatic clearance, supply networks. You are here in a single vessel, 7 people, 41,000 light years from anyone who knows your name. How does that come to be a decision that a civilization makes? Liam looked at the table for a moment. Then he looked up. We have a very old instinct, he said. So old that we mostly do not even think about it anymore. There is always a horizon. And on the other side of the horizon is something we do not know yet. And we want to know it. We have wanted to know it since the very first people on our planet stood up and looked out over a flat piece of land and thought, I wonder what is over there. That instinct has caused us enormous problems over our history. It has also gotten us here, to a table, with you, 41,000 light years from home. He paused. I think on balance we think it is worth it, he said. Even now, the room was quiet. Then something remarkable happened. One of the shorter, broad-shouldered ones, the kind whose skin shifted subtly with color, made a sound. The translation unit thought about it for a moment and then produced. The sound appears to be humor expression. Something at the table had, in some small way, laughed. Not all of them. Not a big laugh. But something. Liam looked surprised for just a moment, and then he smiled. Not a diplomatic smile. An actual one. The formal part of the meeting ended about 20 minutes later. They needed to deliberate, they said. They would have a formal response within 2 days. In the meantime, we were free to move within a designated section of the station under escort and would be provided with anything we needed within reason. Venera walked us back to our rooms. She was quiet for most of the walk. As she left us at the door, she stopped. The council member who made the humor expression, she said. That is Counselor Dow. She has been a member of this council for 60 years. I have not seen her make a humor expression in a meeting before. I looked at Veneral. Is that good? It is unexpected, she said. Again, she left. I wrote in my log that night. The council asked us why we do what we do. Liam told them the truth. I think the truth was the most surprising answer we could have given. I think they expected strategy, goals, an angle. They did not expect us to say, we just want to know what was out there, and even now we think it was worth it. I think that is what frightened them a little. Not us, not our ship, not our numbers. The fact that we meant it. It was 2 months into our stay when Veneral knocked on my door at what the station's clock registered as 3 in the morning. I was awake. I had been awake for an hour because I had made the mistake of trying to calculate exact distances and exact fuel ratios for the trip home, which was something I did sometimes when I wanted to feel productive and instead felt the floor open up under me. The numbers were always the same. Too far, too long, not enough fuel. The only real solution was the drive, and the drive needed a field coil that did not exist anywhere within the range we could reach. We were waiting. That was the real situation. We were waiting for the Sovereignty Council to decide what they were willing to do for us. And in the meantime, we lived in these rooms and tried to be useful and try not to think too hard about how far away home was. When Veneral knocked, I opened the door and she looked different from how she usually looked. Not upset, not frightened, something closer to unsettled in a very deep way. The way a person looks when they have learned something that has reorganized how they understand everything else. She had a data reader in her hand, the kind of station used for long documents. "May I come in?" she said. "Of course," I said. She sat down across from me at the small table. She set the data reader on the surface between us. She looked at it and then at me and then at the ceiling and then back at me. "I have been reading your historical archives," she said. The Steadfast had carried full cultural and historical archives as part of standard First Contact protocol. We had shared them with the Sovereignty Council as a gesture of openness 3 weeks ago. I had not thought much about it since. It was a lot of data. I assumed they were working through it slowly. Apparently, Veneral had not been working through it slowly. "How much have you read?" I asked. "Most of it," she said. She had been at it for weeks, I later realized, without telling anyone. Staying late in her office. Taking the reader to her quarters. Going through 400,000 years of human history, the way someone goes through a book they cannot put down because they cannot quite believe what is happening in it. She picked up the reader. "In your historical records," she said carefully, "there is a period of illness. A large-scale illness that moved across a significant portion of your populated landmass and killed a very large number of people. A third of one region's population." "The Black Death," I said. "Yes. Around 700 years ago. During this period," she said, "what did your civilization do?" I thought about it. Buried the dead. Try to understand what was causing it. Some communities isolated themselves to stop the spread. Some did not. Eventually it passed. People went back to farming, to building, to having children. She looked at me. They went back to farming. They had to eat, I said. She put the reader down. She had pulled up a page of it, and I could see it was a summary section, dates and figures, the shape of catastrophe laid out in clean lines. "I'm trying to understand something," she said. "I've been trying to understand it for weeks. Your species has experienced repeated catastrophic events, large-scale loss of life, environmental disasters, wars between groups within your own civilization. And after each one, the response is the same. You bury the dead. You try to understand what happened, and you go back to building." "Yes," I said. "This is not the response pattern we typically observe in biological civilizations when they experience events of this scale." "What is the typical response?" I asked. She was quiet for a moment. "Fragmentation," she said. "Withdrawal. Civilizations that experience this level of internal catastrophe at your developmental stage tend toward one of two outcomes. They collapse or they overcompensate. They build walls, literal and otherwise. They become defensive in ways that make expansion impossible. They turn inward. We did that too, sometimes," I said. "Parts of us, at different points, but never all of us at once. There was always somewhere that kept going. There was always somewhere that kept going," she repeated. Her voice had a quality I had not heard in it before. Something that was not quite awe and not quite worry. Both of those, maybe. She picked up the reader again. "There is a period in your more recent history," she said. "Within the last 200 years, you developed weapons capable of destroying your entire civilization." "Yes. And you did not use them." "Not to that extent, no." "Ow," she said. And the word was so simple and so direct that I sat with it for a moment before answering. "We decided not to," I said. "It took a while. There were a lot of very close calls. But enough people in enough places decided that the thing we wanted more than to win any particular argument was to keep going, to still be there tomorrow. So we pulled back from the edge." Veneral set the reader flat on the table. She looked at it. "You pulled back from the edge." "Not elegantly," I said. "It was not a clean decision. It was decades of very messy, very difficult decisions by a lot of people who did not agree on much except that particular thing." She looked up at me. "Do you understand," she said, "that from the outside, from a perspective that has studied the development arcs of civilizations across this galaxy for 10,000 years. What you have just described is almost statistically impossible. I blinked. Pardon? A species reaches the capacity for self-destruction. Every model we have suggests that at this point, the probability of survival past this threshold is very low. The weapons exist. The conflicts exist. The incentives to use them exist. And the species does not use them. Not because they are prevented. Not because the weapons fail. But because enough individuals make a choice. She looked at me like I was something she was trying to measure. You chose to keep going, she said. We wanted to see what came next, I said. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, there's a section in your archives, a category of cultural entertainment, large-scale imagined scenarios in which your civilization is destroyed. By illness, by environmental collapse, by invasion, by your own weapons. End-of-the-world stories, I said. Yes, we have a lot of those. They are entertainment, she said. It was not quite a question. They are, yes. You make entertainment out of imagining your own extinction. It is a way of processing it, I think, I said, exploring the fear in a safe space, understanding what we value by imagining losing it. We have been telling those stories for a long time. Veneral looked at the ceiling. She stayed like that for almost a full minute. I did not interrupt. I understood, I thought, what was happening. She was reorganizing something, fitting a new piece into a picture that had seemed complete and finding that the piece changed the shape of everything around it. There is a faction on the council, she said eventually, without looking down, that argues we should help you reach home as quickly as possible. Not out of goodwill. The argument is strategic. Strategic how? I asked. She looked at me then. Level. Direct. With that quality she had of saying difficult things without softening them, which I had come to appreciate greatly. The argument is, she said, that a species with your particular psychological profile, given sufficient time and sufficient motivation, will eventually return to this area of space regardless of the outcome of this meeting. The question the faction is asking is whether it is better to send you home informed about the sovereignty and on reasonable terms, or to have you arrive again with no relationship established and no goodwill between us. I looked at her. That is a very practical argument. The sovereignty is a practical institution, she said. What does the other faction argue? They argue that the fastest route home for your ship is also through the most sensitive regions of sovereignty space, and that the risk of granting access is greater than the risk of not helping. And where do you stand? I asked. She looked at me again. I've been reading your history for 3 weeks, she said. I have not slept well in 10 days. I look at your species, and I see something I do not have a category for. I see a civilization that has survived things that should have ended it repeatedly, and that has responded each time by building something and going further. She paused. I find it very difficult to be neutral about that. I did not say anything. There was not anything to say. She picked up the reader. She stood. I will have a formal update on the council's decision within 2 days. In the meantime, she paused at the door. The recycler in the corridor outside your rooms is also not working correctly. I thought Engineer Ford might want to know. She left. I sat at the table for a while after that, not thinking about distances or fuel ratios, thinking about what she had said, about the statistics, about survival past a threshold that should have been the end. I thought about all the people across all of history who had buried their dead and gone back to work, who had stood at the edge of the worst thing that had happened to them yet and decided, not calmly, not without fear, but stubbornly, irreversibly, that tomorrow was something they wanted to see. It had never felt like bravery when I thought about it. It had felt like what you do. Maybe that was the thing Veneral could not quite fit into any category she had. Not the action, not the outcome. The fact that for us, it was just what you do. I wrote in my log. She read our history. All of it. And the thing that unsettled her most was not the wars or the disasters. It was that we are still here. It was that we looked at every ending and decided it was not the end. I do not know if that is something to be proud of or something to be humble about. Maybe it is just something to keep doing. I closed the log and went to find Danny. He had been up for 2 hours working on the language, and I wanted to see how much further he had gotten. He was always further than you expected. That was a very human thing, too. The morning they told us we were going home started like every other morning on the station had started for 2 months, which is to say Veneral arrived at our rooms while half the crew was still drinking something hot and the other half was already working on something. She came in and stood near the door, and I could tell from the way she stood that the decision had been made. There's a posture people have when they are about to deliver something final, a kind of stillness. She had it. The council has reached a decision, she said. Liam set down his cup. And you'll be resupplied fully. Food, water, essential materials. The Sovereignty Technical Division has agreed to fabricate a replacement field coil for your drive to the specifications your engineer provided. It will take approximately 10 days to complete. Upon installation, your drive should be functional. The room went quiet, not the tense silence of people waiting for bad news. A different kind of quiet. In addition, Venero continued, you will be provided with star charts covering the relevant corridor of sovereignty space between this station and the outer boundary nearest your home system. A calculated jump route has been prepared by our navigators in consultation with the data you provided about your drive's range and limitations. It should bring you to within a distance your repaired drive can cover in 3 to 4 additional jumps. And the conditions? Liam asked. Because there were always conditions. You will carry a sovereignty diplomatic package back to your homeworld. It is a formal record of this contact, an introduction to the sovereignty for your civilization, and an invitation to establish formal communication. Nothing binding. No commitments. Simply an opening. We are happy to carry it, Liam said. Benaral Nadif. She glanced around the room at the little things that had accumulated over 2 months. Danny's stack of notebooks, 3 of them now filled. Grace's medical station by the door. Owen's toolkit, which had expanded because people kept finding things for him to fix. Kate's weather instruments. Neil's recording equipment, which had produced a documentary that the station's communication network had apparently started broadcasting to interested parties across 17 decks. There is one additional element, Veneral said. Yes, Liam said. Your crew member Neil Croft's documentary recording. The station authority has formally requested permission to retain a copy for Sovereignty Historical Archives. Neil looked up from his work. He blinked. The documentary, he said. It has been well received, Veneral said, in the precise tone of someone massively understating something. I found out later that the documentary, which Neil had made simply because making a record was his job and he did not know how to stop doing his job, had been viewed by roughly 4 million station residents over the past 6 weeks. It had been picked up by a Sovereignty broadcast channel 2 weeks in. It had been translated into 11 sovereignty languages and was apparently being discussed in places neither Neil nor any of us had ever expected our faces to appear. It was a documentary about 7 humans being lost in space. Neil had made it with the same practical attention he gave everything, recording the work and the conversations and the small daily details without drama or manufactured tension. Apparently, 4 million people had found this riveting. You can absolutely keep a copy, Neil said. He sounded genuinely pleased. Veneral looked at him with the expression she always had when one of us did something she had not fully prepared for. The next 10 days were full. Owen worked with the Sovereignty technical team on the field coil. The technical team, 3 engineers from 2 different species, were initially cautious around him. By day 3, they were working side by side and communicating through a combination of translation units and increasingly expressive hand gestures, because some things are the same regardless of what you look like, and one of those things is the conversation between engineers trying to make a part work. Liam spent most of the time in formal meetings. There were a lot of formal meetings. The Sovereignty had questions, the Council had follow-up questions, and there were representatives of 3 other species aboard the station who had requested separate meetings because they wanted to ask their own questions and the Council had agreed. Liam sat through all of it with patience and honesty, and when the questions got complicated, a very particular kind of diplomacy that was less about saying the right words and more about being completely and consistently real. Grace and the station's medical officer had developed something that was not quite a friendship, but was close. They had started comparing medical data out of professional curiosity and had ended up in a months-long exchange of information that both of them found intensely interesting. On the ninth day, Grace came back to the rooms looking thoughtful and told us that certain approaches in sovereignty medicine and certain approaches in human medicine were solving the same problems from different angles, and that the combination was something neither civilization had arrived at alone. "That is going in my report," she said, in the satisfied tone of someone who has found exactly what they were looking for without knowing that was what they were looking for. Kate had spent much of the 2 months doing geological and atmospheric analysis of the station's external environment and the surrounding region of space. She had a full data set that she described on the morning before our departure as the most interesting thing she had ever collected, and also the most painful to know she would have to wait years to fully analyze. Danny had filled 5 notebooks. He had reached a point with the Kelthari language where he could hold a simple conversation without the translation unit, which was apparently unusual enough that Venero mentioned it to the council as a footnote in one of her reports. The council had requested a copy of his notes. Danny gave them gladly and kept a copy of his own. Neil had kept recording. On the night before departure, Venero came to our rooms one last time. Not as an official visit. She came after the station's working hours, in the quieter light that the station shifted to in its equivalent of evening. And she brought with her 2 containers of a warm drink that was not coffee, but was close enough in effect that we had started accepting it gratefully. She sat with Liam and me at the table. We drank the not coffee. Outside the rooms, the rest of the crew was doing the same kind of settling that people do before a journey, checking things, packing things, moving through spaces one last time with the bittersweet awareness that leaving means something. "I want to ask you something," Venero said. "Not officially." "Go ahead," Liam said. "When you go back," she said. "When you reach Earth, what will you tell them about us?" Liam thought about it. "The truth," he said, "that we found a civilization that has been here for 10,000 years, that spans 43 species that took us in when we were lost and helped us go home. That they were careful with us and curious about us and kind to us in the ways that they could manage." Venero was quiet. "Will they come back?" she asked. "Your civilization. Will they come this way again?" "Yes," Liam said simply. "Probably not for a while. Probably not until we have better drive technology and more experience and a better plan than this one. But yes, we will come back." "I thought so," Venero said. "Does that worry you?" I asked. She looked at her drink. 60 years ago, I would have said yes," she said. "A species that moves through fear rather than around it. A species whose history is a record of surviving what should have ended them and continuing forward afterward. From a security perspective, that is not a comfortable thing to have arriving at your borders." "And now?" I asked. She was quiet for a moment. "Now, I've spent 2 months watching 7 of you fix broken things and fill notebooks and make documentaries that 4 million people chose to watch in their spare time." She looked up. "I think the thing I was afraid of was something I did not understand. I understand it better now." "Is it less frightening?" Liam asked. "No," she said, "but it is a different kind of frightening. And I think it is possible to be frightened of something and still be glad it exists." We sat with that for a while. The drink was warm. The station hummed at its constant low note. Outside, someone was walking through the corridor, and we could hear the footsteps, a different rhythm from a human gait, but steady and familiar after 2 months. "Thank you," Liam said, "for everything. The repair, the charts, the time. You repaired 11 things in this wing of the station without being asked," Venero said. "The balance is not in our favor." Liam smiled. "Owen has a hard time leaving things broken." "I know," she said. "It is documented." In the morning, we walked to Bay 67 for the last time. The escort was larger than it had been on arrival. Venero was there. The sovereignty technical team that had worked with Owen was there, 3 engineers standing together who gave Owen a formal nod that clearly meant something in their culture. The station's medical officer was there, standing with Grace. Counselor Dow was there, the one who had made the humor expression in that first meeting, small and broad-shouldered with the subtly shifting skin, standing at a slight distance from the others but present. Neil recorded all of it. Of course he did. At the base of the ramp, Veneral presented Liam with a diplomatic package and a secondary case that she said contained copies of sovereignty star charts for the region we had passed through, beyond what was required for our route home, general reference material. Then she handed me something separately, a small flat disk, the kind the station used for data storage. "This is the complete set of my observation reports on your crew," she said. "Every official log I filed during your stay." I looked at her. "Are you supposed to give me this?" "No," she said, "but I thought you might want to know how you appeared from the outside." I put it in my jacket pocket. "Thank you." She looked at me for a moment. "Vera," she said, using my given name for the first time in 2 months. "When you return, and you will return, come to this station first." "I will," I said. She stepped back. We went up. The Steadfast powered up without complaint. Owen had spent the 10 days not just working on the field coil, but going through every other system on the ship and correcting every small inefficiency he could find. The ship was in better mechanical condition than it had been on the day we left Earth. Liam brought up the NAV display, and I loaded the route the Sovereignty navigators had prepared. It was precise and careful, threaded through the sensitivity of sovereignty space with consideration for both our limitations and their concerns. It was the work of people who were very good at what they did and who had, I thought, put more care into it than they were strictly required to. "Ready?" Liam asked. "Ready," I said. The docking clamps released. The ship moved. As we cleared Bay 67 and entered the approach lane, Neil's recording equipment caught what I could not have anticipated. On the bay deck below, the assembled group watched us go. Veneral stood at the front, and as the Steadfast rose, Counselor Dow, the one who had laughed, raised one broad-fingered hand. Not a formal gesture, not a protocol, just a raised hand. I do not know what it meant in her culture. In mine it meant, "Goodbye. I see you. Go well." I raised my hand back. The station fell behind us. The corridor of sovereignty space opened ahead, mapped and charted and lit with stars I now had names for. The route home was long and would take months. The math was hard, but it was possible, and possible was all we had ever needed. Danny was already in his seat with a new notebook. Kate had her instruments running. Grace was in the med bay doing an inventory. Neil was recording the forward display, the station shrinking behind us because it was the kind of image that deserved to be recorded. Owen came to the bridge doorway and leaned against the frame. "Drive is nominal," he said. "Field coil is reading perfect. Whoever fabricated that, they know their work." "They do," I said. Liam looked at the forward display. Ahead was a corridor of sovereignty space, and beyond it, the long dark between the stars, and beyond that, home. A specific star, a specific blue planet, a specific weight of gravity, and a specific smell of rain. "All right," he said. "Let us go home." We went. Months of travel is a long time. It does not lend itself to drama in the conventional sense. There is work and sleep and meals and conversation and the particular closeness that comes from 7 people sharing a small space through something large. There are hard days when the distance feels impossible and the longing for familiar things sits in the chest like something heavy. There are good days when someone discovers a new detail in the sovereignty data and shares it at dinner, and everyone talks about it for hours. Danny translated the entire sovereignty diplomatic package during the journey. Not his job, technically, but he did it anyway because he wanted to know what it said before we handed it over to anyone else. It was, he told us, a formal and careful document. Not cold, thoughtful. It described the contact in precise language, and then, at the end, in a section that did not have an exact precedent in sovereignty diplomatic style, according to Veneral's own notes, it included something like a personal statement from the Council. It said, "We encountered a species that was lost and did not behave as if it was lost. We encountered a species whose history should have ended it and did not. We encountered a species that, when asked to explain itself, said it wanted to know what was out there and meant it. We do not have a complete understanding of humanity. We do not expect to, but we have found that we are curious. We hope the feeling is mutual." It had always been. I wrote my last log entry for the journey in the final hours before we reached the point where Liam would order the first home jump. I wrote, "We were lost. We were found, not rescued, exactly. We did not need rescuing. We needed help, and help came, and then we helped back where we could. The Steadfast is in better condition than when we left. 5 notebooks full of a language no human had ever studied before. Medical data that Grace says will save lives. Geological data that Kate says will take years to work through. A documentary that 4 million people have watched. And a diplomatic package that is the beginning of a conversation between humanity and 43 species that did not know we existed 2 months ago. We frightened them, not with anything we intended, just with the fact that we were fine, with the fact that we were curious, with the fact that we had survived everything we had survived and still wanted to know what was on the other side of the horizon. I think we will keep frightening them. I think that is probably unavoidable. But Veneral said something on that last night that I keep coming back to, that it is possible to be frightened of something and still be glad it exists. I hope we are something they are glad exists. I think we might be. I hope we go back. We will go back. Liam's voice came over the ship-wide channel. Quiet. Steady. The voice of a man who had been through something that could have broken him and had declined to be broken. All hands, he said. Prepare for jump. We're going home. The drive engaged. The stars shifted, and then there was a new sky full of stars we recognized, and in the center of it, a pale blue point of light. I did not say anything. None of us did for a moment. And then Danny laughed. Not a big laugh, just the laugh of someone who sees something they love after a very long absence. A surprised, relieved, simple laugh. And then the rest of us were laughing too, in the tired, grateful, slightly overwhelmed way of people who have come a very long way and are almost home. We had gone 41,000 light years from Earth. We had sat at a table with 9 beings from 4 species and told them why we do what we do. We had fixed broken things in corridors we were not supposed to be in and taught card games to 12 species and made a documentary that 4 million people watched and filled 5 notebooks and repaired a field coil that should have been impossible to replace. We had done it the way humans do everything. One thing at a time. One problem after another. Forward. Always forward. The blue point of light grew slowly brighter in the display. We went home. And on a station 41,000 light years behind us, Veneral sat in her office in the quiet after the end of a shift and opened a file on a reader. Not a report. Not official anything. She opened the copy of Neil's documentary. She had watched it many times by now. She started it again from the beginning. On the screen, the Steadfast docked in Bay 67 for the first time. 7 small figures came down the ramp into a bay that was far too large for them. One of them had a toolkit. One had a medical bag. One had a paper notebook. One had recording equipment. One had a geology scanner. And 2 of them were looking around the bay with the same expression on their faces. Wonder. Plain and simple and completely unguarded. Veneral watched them walk into the station, into the 43 species, 10,000-year-old civilization that had been very certain it had seen everything. And she thought, they're going to come back. And the feeling that came with that thought was not dread. It was something else. Something that in the Kelthri language had a very old word, a word older than the sovereignty, a word from the time before the first council, when her people had first looked up at their sky and wondered what was in it. The word meant, I want to see what happens next. She watched the documentary until the end. Then she opened a new file and started writing. She titled it, Preliminary Recommendations for the Establishment of a Sovereignty-Humanity Liaison. She wrote until morning. Outside her window, the stars burned steady in their ancient places, the same as they had always been, the same as they would always be, a map of everything that was and everything that could be, waiting the way horizons wait for whoever had the particular human kind of courage to look at them and say, I wonder what is out there. The answer, as it turned out, was quite a lot, and more of it every day.